Hello everyone, hope everyone is doing well. So in this video I'm going to fetch the chat list and also going to implement the one-to-one chat using Firebase Realtime database. Previously we implemented login, register, adding our project to Firebase, and also the chat list structure. You can go to the chat list playlist, chatter playlist, and find out all the videos regarding that topic. So in this video I'm going to fetch this chat list, also going to implement the one-to-one chat. Okay, so we used a logic just to like name, image, email ID, and about and last message. And but right now we're going to add another add one more thing that we definitely forgot to add, that is a room ID. So in one-to-one chat, suppose I'm chatting with someone like Chris Jackson or so Jennifer Lawrence. So if I'm chatting with them, so based on a room ID we're going to do a chat one-to-one. So we're going to add a room ID in here, and then we can do a one-to-one chat. Okay, so there are a couple of things we're going to implement before try to fetch the chat list. So I can also going to the Firebase console, and we're going to remove the existing chat list data we have. We're going to create from scratch again the chat list, the structure. Okay, so right now we're adding the name. This is my data. So we are adding the name, image, email ID, about, and last message, and we are storing that to two separate user. Okay, so whenever we are doing that particular we are doing that particular storing the data, first we are going to create a variable that is called room ID, and we are going to generate a unique room ID for that. So if you guys remember, we use something in that particular, sorry, not in the login, in the register screen to generate create a unique ID. We use the React Native UUID package, so you're going to use the same over here. So just going to define over here, sorry, and also going to import the UUID. So if you go to the register page, and we're going to use this particular library. Okay, so I'm storing that in a variable. The reason why I'm storing that in a variable, not putting directly inside the object, because when going to create the chat list, so if we're not storing that in the variable, suppose we put that over here and also here, so it will generate two different ID because it's calling two times. So the reason why I'm storing that here is the one that we're going to call that particular package again and get a unique ID, and we're going to pass that ID in every data we have. So that is room ID, and I will also add that one as well. So now if we click on save and go to that particular, so go over here and click on that particular thing. Obviously getting an error because we haven't defined anything in the single chat, and because if you, so let me reload and let me explain why it's happening. So if you're going that from here, so we are passing that data we have like a name, image, and stuff, but we are not passing anything from the user application. We're just passing just navigating to that particular screen, so that's why getting that error. So we're going to fix that later. Right now we're going to see what's our chat list look like. So we have a room ID, and if you expand this one, we can see that the both are room ID are the same. So based on that particular room ID, we are going to store the chat of this particular two user. Okay, I hope you got my point. If you like you're having any trouble like understanding this logic, you can put your question in the comment section. I will try to answer as soon as possible. Okay, so we have a chat list, and One thing you need to notice over here was storing that data like the email ID, image, all in that particular file, also all in a particular object for right now. But for later, we try to like join the tables based on the ID we have and try to fetch the updated one. But right now, we're going to just implementing in the easiest way to make available to understand for everyone. Now we're going to, so we have a chat list, and if we click on, so let me comment out that one. So if you click on, I guess we click on developer in the last, yeah, we're going to click on dev 3. So the chat list data is created. Yeah, the chat list data is created. So now we're going to fetch that data inside that particular screen, and let me enable this one. And this particular screen over here, it's the index file inside the home folder. So we already fetching the data. It's like a static data right now. So we're going to do the dynamic and get the data from Firebase Realtime database. For now, for that particular reason, first we're going to use the Redux data, because we're going to need to pass the user ID. So we already stored our data inside that Redux. So first we're going to use selector to fetch the data. And we also need to import the use selector, and I'm going to define a state. Suppose it's called chat list. So by default it's going to be an array, and we're going to define an use effect, and inside that use effect we're going to call a function that suppose like get chat list, and in the dependency you don't need anything. Okay, and we also need to import the use effect as well as the use state. Okay, so get chat list is not defined, that's getting that error. So let me define that. Okay, so we defined the get chat list function. So now we're going to call that particular. So suppose now we're going to use like Firebase Realtime database to fetch the data. So we can do a couple of things, like we can do one-time read, but in case of one-time read, suppose we're just doing a one-time read. So if someone send you a message, so we're not going to get a real-time update. So for that we're not going to do one-time read, we're going to use real-time changes like this one. So first we're going to import that database in the top, like where the import section is there, and then we're going to copy this particular thing and paste over here. And we need to define the table name, that means the collection name we have, that is chat list, and that is chat list. And inside the chat list we have a particular key for that user. I guess it's this one. So first we need going to console the user data. So we're going to see what we have inside the user data, and we're gonna just, so if we go over here, so inside the user data we have about, we have email ID, this is the user data we have. So we're going to use this particular ID. So user data, we're going to pass this particular ID we have, and based on that ID we're going to get a response, and that going to be the chat list data. If you go to the console, we are getting a data. So let me open that in JSON viewer, so it will be more easy for you to understand what we are getting in the response. Okay, so we're getting that in a key format. So we use something in that particular all user page that is called object.values, and we just need the value. So that means we're gonna remove the key we are getting inside that key. So if we like do this, and so now we are getting an array, and inside that array we only have the data we want. So it's terminated the key, means remove the key, because object.values did just get the value, not the key. So we have that room ID and name and stuff that we want. So if now we are going to store that inside our state. So before storing that inside our state, we do need to put a condition, and that is if this thing not equals to null, only that time we are going to store that inside our state, because if you are getting that null, so it will be, and the app will be crashed, because by default you will get a null value. So store that inside our state. Now we're going to change that with the chat list, and if we save, we are getting that two value that we supposed to get, and inside that is image, and for subtitle we have something called last message. So it's blank by default. Okay, so now we are getting that value. So suppose let me change, so we are getting this value, and if something just change, and inside that, suppose let me edit the last message, and we will get a real-time response. So if I click on save, see, we are getting that real-time response over here. So we fetch the chat list data right now, and now we're going to implement the single chat, one-to-one single chat. Okay, so for that particular thing, so we are passing the data over here, and if we click on that particular thing, we are getting the name over here at the top, but we're not getting that image. So we're going to fix that first. So if we navigate to single chat page, so in the message component, not in the message component, in the chat header, we have something. We have the name over here. We don't need the icon, so just put it the icon. Maybe we need that later. So we're gonna change the img, so we can see the image. So now we have the name, we have the image. So it's changing for the both user. See, so based on that room ID, we are going to do the single chat. Now we're going to do the one-to-one chat. So if we come back to the single chat screen, so we have the state already defined. So on change state, set message. So whenever we are calling this particular button, we need to call a function. Suppose it's like send message, so we're going to define that function, send message. So first I'm going to create an object, that message data that we are sending. So first it will have something called message itself, and that is message, and we also have from, we also have to, also have send time. For send time, I'm going to use moment dot format, and we also have message type. we are adding this message type because if we want to implement like sending audio, sending video, so we're going to like know who the for which particular which message type we're going to render which components. So we're going to need a definitely type. So instead of like text true, image true, or video true, or maybe audio true, you can simply store that inside a simple key. So we're going to suppose text, that means text message. Okay, so inside the from, so the user will be inside the from. So we're going to use selector one more time, and we're going to get the user data over here. So inside the from we have user data dot id, and inside the to we have the data. So we're going to check the console what we are getting inside the data, and for right now suppose it's blank, so we're going to check the data we are getting, and then we're going to put the data over here. So if you go to the console, inside the data we are getting also an id, so we're going to pass that id. Inside that too we're going to have data dot id, and we also need to add the room id as well. So we can do that in a particular single message as well, or we're gonna do that. So we're gonna store that chat inside a particular room id. So inside a room id we're gonna have a collection of chat. So we can do that. We obviously going to do that, or we can also store that room id inside every single chat. So I can also do that as well. So suppose room id equals to data dot room id. Okay, so click on save, and now I'm going to, so how you are going to store that messages. So the way we store created the chat list. So we used an update for the chat list, but we're not going to use an update for the for that messages. So we have something called push. Yeah, this one. So we have something called push. So we're going to use this one. So if we copy this particular piece of code and paste over here, actually let me format this function. Okay, and we also need to import the database at the top. Let me remove the unwanted code we have. So we're going to import the database. Now we have the database. We are creating a key. So right here we're going to pass the table name we want to do. So suppose it will be messages, and inside that messages we are going to pass that particular room id. Inside that room id we are going to store that data. So we have messages, we have the room id, and this is the auto generated key, and in that auto generated key we are going to pass that key inside that. So this will be our message id. So we have that. So once data is stored in the table, that we will have a good idea about that structure and the data we are storing. So inside that so definitely not going to use only set, because set only will be remove the existing data and update the new, and we're not going to use the update because it will also do the same thing. Based on the id we are going to update the data. And so push we are doing because each time we are going to send a message we need to store every message, right? So that's why we're using the push, and so because of that we're going to use the push, and inside the set we are just pass this piece of code over here. So we have a console that, like suppose message data updated. So if you click on save and type something, suppose hey hello, so if you click on send button, so we supposed to have a message table. Inside that we have a room ID, and inside that we can supposed to have that data we are passing. So if you go to the data Firebase console, we have definitely have a message table. So inside that we also have a room ID, that is the room ID 36FF2. So if we check the console, the room ID was 36FF2 over here. So the room ID is same, and inside that we have data, we have another object, and that is the message data. So inside the two we have the receiver ID, inside the form we have the user ID, we have a unique message ID, we have the message, we have the message type, we have the room ID, we have the send time. Okay, so the data is storing perfectly, but so whenever we are going to sending that message, we also need to update the chat list as well, right? Because inside the chat list we have something called last message. So the last message, we need to fetch the last message over here. So for that we are going to update the chat list, and we also need to update the chat list of both user. The user, we are the sender and the receiver. So inside that update, inside that then, and we definitely have a console. We don't need the console anymore, and we also don't need to see the particular reference key. So inside that particular then, we're going to update that last message. So inside the all user screen, we definitely have that piece of code. So here we updating the message. So if you copy that one and come to here and paste this particular piece of code, so we are updating the chat list based on the ID. So data.id is the receiver ID. So receiver ID, and in the receiver ID, inside the receiver ID, we are updating the chat, updating the chat of that particular user that we are getting the message from. And you also, and now you need a object for that. So if you create an object like chat list update, so we just need this parameter. Okay, so I click on that particular. So we just need this parameter. Okay, so the last message will be this particular thing, and we're going to also pass the send time as well, because in case we need to show the time over here. So for the send time, I'm going to pass that particular message data and dot same time. I'm not going to use moment dot format over here. We're going to use that particular same time that is defined in that particular message data, because as well the reason why I'm doing this, because the same reason where passing storing that room ID in a single variable. Okay, so for the chat list data, we just need to pass that over here. So for this particular scenario, it will update the data for that receiver. So now you also need to copy this one and paste over here, and also need to update that sender where sender chat list. So the both of the things will be updated, and after that we are going to set the message state to an empty string. And if you click on save, and suppose we are going to chat with dev3, we don't have anything inside that particular last message section. So if you send like hey, so if you click on the send, so it's after that data, it's just set to empty string. And if you go back to the chat list, so we're supposed to have the last message, hey how are you doing. So we definitely updating the chat list, hey how are you doing. So we are getting that data. I guess it makes sense. Okay, so now we're going to do the dynamic section of the single chat. So we're just sending the data, and also one more thing we need to do. So right now we're not putting any condition in the top, because so if you're not entering anything and if you still click on the particular send icons, it will send a message. Let me show you. So it will send a message. So if you go back to the particular scene, you can see blank, and you can also check that over inside that message section. Inside the message section, the last message, we have the empty string. So we also need to block that. So we're going to put an if condition over here. So message, if message equals to an empty string, then we're going to do a toast, and it will say enter something. Okay, and I'm going to put a return false. So if you try to click on the send message now, okay, so it says enter something. And we also need to put another condition, because if we click on the space, so it's not it's up now. If you click on that particular icon, it will send the message, because empty the blank space is also counted as a value. So you're going to also need put a condition on that as well. So you already have a function over here. So you're going to check and remove the message. So it will check for that empty spaces in at the beginning, and then you can check if user is only entering the spaces only. So if you try to enter only space and try to click on send, okay, so something is wrong. Message validation. Okay, we need to put or over here. So if we try to do the enter something, it will get blocked. So I hope it's making sense. So I'm going to format the page one time. Okay, so now what we need to do, we need to fetch the data that we are showing over here, and we can also use another emulator to check whether we're getting the one-to-one chat or not. But before that, we need to fetch that particular chat list, so you can see that a real-time response, we are getting the message. So for that, we're going to define an use effect, and inside that use effect we are going to call a function that is get all chat. So it will get the existing chat as well. So right now we need to define the use effect as well. Okay, so right now for getting the chat, that means we are going to fetch data from this particular table, the messages, this particular collection we have. So inside that messages, we are going to have a separate based on the room ID, we are going to have that data. So we are going to fetch based on the room ID. So fetching the data, we're not going to use dot ones, or not going to use the snapshot of our real-time changes. We're going to use something different. So we're going to use on child added. So the reason why I'm using this, I'm gonna explain a bit later. Okay, so the child added, we are using this child added. So because the child address, what is child address do? So whenever suppose we are, so whenever you are doing the chat, you will get a response, and if you are using that snapshot over at the top, what is the snapshot? If you used this snapshot over the time, so it will fetch all the data one more time. So if something is changes in the table, suppose something changes in the user table, so it will fetch all the data that is available based on that ID. And if you use the child added, so it will not fetch all the data. So it will fetch the only data that is inserted to the table, and it will work. It will give a response like real-time response if there is a data inserted to the table, not updated to the table. So each time you are going to send a message, it will be inserted to the table. So data will be inserted inside the message table, and based on that insert data, it's gonna return the data that inserted. Okay, I hope you got my point. And still, if you have any question, you can simply comment your question below. So it's already defined how you're going to use that data. Okay, so if you copy this use effect instead of that one, so it's still gonna work. So if you use the use effect, we already have the database defined at the table. Okay, so now we're going to need to pass that table name, and that is the messages. And so the table name is messages, and for that we need to pass that particular room ID as well. So data dot room ID, and what we are doing in the return. So whenever you are in that particular screen, so we're going to listen to the every single data that is inserted to the table. So whenever you click on back, so that time the return will be called, and it will remove the listener. As is mentioned over here, stop listening for the updates when no longer required. Okay, so now if we click on save and try to see what the data we are getting, so we have something called a new node has been added. So we're gonna look for that particular console in the, and also comment out this one. So in the console log, we're going to check what are the response we are getting. Right now we are getting an error because in the dependency section of use effect, when you are going to pass that particular room ID, because we don't have any user ID. So if you go to the dev3 and go to the console, it says that new node added. So by default, when I'm going to this particular screen and that function is fired, so it's fetching all the data we have in the table, and so we're going to store that data inside a state in order to fetch over here. So we are getting the data that we want from the database, and also you're going to get the data after that particular message sent. So in order to store the data, we have a state called set all chat. So in set all chat, so we're going to do something like this. Sorry, not this. Okay, so it's going to be an array. We're going to use the spade operator, and we're going to use that particular object that we want to store, and we don't need to put a console over here. So now it's storing the data inside that all chat state. So instead of using the dummy data we have inside the flat list, we're going to pass the data now we're getting from the Firebase. So if you click on save, we are getting something, but there is some there is no message is showing, because inside the message we need to pass the message, and that is the name for that particular message is The name for that particular message is message, so we're going to check inside the component. Okay, so inside the message component we have something called, so first we're going to put console what we are getting inside that item. Inside the item we are getting the data. Yeah, that is correct. So okay, let me so you can see the messages. So let me fix that item dot type also. So in the component we are passing something called sender. So if the sender is me, so the message will be supposed to be the right hand side, and from if I'm receiving the message, that will be defined in the left hand side. So in the item dot type, if right now it's putting like this, but we're going to change that, and if we're going to put the condition in based on the form, because we are passing something in the form in the user ID, that the basically the sender ID, and if it's me, so it's gonna true. See, it's coming to this side, and by default the if it's true, it's going to be a white text, or otherwise it will be a so you can see the messages over here. So we are getting that messages. Okay, so now what we need to do, first we're going to go to the database and we're going to remove the empty text we have, empty messages we have. So we terminated one empty messages, we have another empty messages, and I'm going to remove this one as well. So if we come back to the particular chat section, so we have the messages, and right now, so if I click on the send, suppose message send testing. So if you click on the send icon, so the message sending set is sending, and it also we are getting the data from the Firebase, and also the input text is blank. So but right now it's supposed to be at the bottom, and this one supposed to be at the top, right? So we are using something called inverted in order to okay, let me show you one more time. So in inverted, in order to get the data at the bottom. Okay, so we're still going to use the inverted, and for that messages that we are getting, so we are going to use something called JavaScript. So right now it's like this is the first value, this is the second, this is the third one, right? So because it's inverted, so it's reverse the array, and also it's start at the from the bottom. So if we comment out the inverted, and you can see the proper order we want to get, hello, hi, and that. Okay, so if you click another time, send another time, and click on the send, so we are getting that at the bottom that we're supposed to get, because but it's in the top. So if you want to implement your chat like this way, so you can still use this method. You just need to comment out the inverted, and it will still work. Okay, so let me open another emulator and show you the real-time one-to-one chat section, and we're going to talk about a couple of things more in that particular video, because while trying to create the chat list, I still need to create something, I still need to add something, and still going to talk about that as well. Okay, but before that, just let me open an emulator. So I opened another emulator and I logged in as dev3. Okay, so in dev3 we are getting the data and from dev1, and I'm sending from dev3. So if you click on dev3, like message received, so click on send and we are received over here, and if you send from here, okay, so we are getting an error from this particular thing in the index.js 108. Let me check what is the error in index.js. Okay, so let me comment out from now. Now getting the data, and if we so for that we need to, as you can see, need to scroll down. If we enable the inverted, we don't need to scroll down, it will be okay. So we're going to look at that error that we are getting. For now, just let me enable the inverted, and so it's message coming at the top. So you need to, in order to fix that, so whenever you open the chat, we just want to stay at the bottom. So for that particular thing, we have another function, JavaScript function, that is sort. So we're going to sort the message based on the message send time, and the function, I already have the function. So just we're going to copy that function and we're going to paste over here, and instead of directly passing that all chat in the flat list, we're going to do a sort. Sort will be based on the send time, and when if you are not getting that sort correctly, so try to use in the send time, try to use maximum like the millisecond, so it will be unique, and then you can have that data. So you are getting the two data right now, so I don't know why, because we're going to check that later. Okay, so now if we're trying to send the message, says hello, so we can see the hello over here, but we cannot see the message time. So maybe, okay, maybe check me into the message component. So the message time delivery, okay, if sender is true, then is white, and then otherwise it's gray. So do we have anything called white? Okay, so instead of white, we need to pass something kind of black color, or maybe theme color. Okay, no, not okay, gray. Okay, we don't have that gray icon, so let me put another. Yeah, we can see the time now. Okay, so we can see the time, we can see in real-time response that we are getting the message, and if you send message again, testing, you can see over here, I can see over here, Okay, now we have something called, so now we are getting that chat list is mixed. So for that particular scenario, we're going to use in the same time section, I need to use something, and instead of just passing date dot moment dot format, we're going to pass something including the millisecond also. So we're going to change the same time with something different. Okay, so regarding the short, so I find the alternative quick way. So instead of using JavaScript short, we can still pass the all chat, and we don't need that short function anymore. So in the top, when you are getting the message, and by default, if you click on save and if you try to do the chat, suppose, hey, okay, so because it was open for a long time and I did couple of times save. Okay, so if we are getting that at the top, but the order is correct, right? Because we are getting the way we're supposed to get. So instead of when we are storing the chat, we are adding that in the last index of that array. So instead of storing that in the last index, the new chat are going to store that in a first index. So if we go back from that particular screen and click on save, and if we go to the screen, so you can see it's coming the proper way, because we just manipulate the index of our chat. And if we do chat couple of times for testing purpose, everything seems to work the way we expected. Yeah, so the order is same. Yeah, so the thing is working proper manner. Okay, so I guess you have a rough idea how to do that. And we have something called, we're not going to use this thing, we're going to use something called disable. So when we are going to use the disable, so whenever you are sending a message, so we are going to set that disable to true, and after sending the message, we are going to set the disable to false. Because why we are using this disable? Because each time you are sending a message, so clicking the button, it took a couple of milliseconds to send the message and set that text input to empty string, right? So in that particular time, so it will block the button, disable the button, so user cannot manipulate and try to send an empty message. Okay, so the it's working in a proper manner. So let's keep it one more time. Yeah, so yeah, it's working in a proper manner. Okay, so we did receive this empty key. I don't know why. So because we are deleting couple of times, then again adding the data, because of that maybe. So we are going to remove the existing chat list and the message, and we are going to check with the fresh data. So we don't have anything in that chat list. So if we click on div 1, and now it's the time to we need to send the data from all user to single chat. So if we go to the index screen, and where we are passing the data, we are passing that whole object that have the room ID as well. So we are gonna also do the same. So before sending that to that particular data, we are gonna pass that data, and inside that we have an item. So inside the item, what we have the user data, you have the ID and everything, and you also need to add the room ID as well. So we can simply send the data, and inside the data we have the room ID, and we have the room ID, we have the user data and stuff. So we're going to again delete the chat list table, and if we check now, okay, so now if we go to the chat, this particular screen and click on dev 1, so the dev 1 is showing over here, and the image also, and you also have a chat list in the saying that yeah, we are getting a message from dev 3. So if we click on messages now, and check if we are getting any extra key. Okay, we're still getting an extra key, so we need to find out why. Okay, so it's happening if we send the message to the first time. Okay, so we have a problem in the single chat. When we are updating the chat list, we are getting that issue. Okay, you can still check on that. Okay, the ID it's getting undefined, so because of that we are getting that data. Okay, so right here chat list is correct, user data dot id, okay, inside the receiver data we have couple of things, but we don't have that ID. Yeah, we have room ID, we have about, email ID, image, name, but we don't have the ID. So why we don't have the ID? Okay, first let me check if there is in the chat list section we have the ID or not. Yeah, in the chat list section we don't have the ID. So there is a problem while we trying to create the chat list. So we have the room ID section over here. Okay, so we just need to add ID over here. Because of that, because we are not passing the ID. Okay, now we will not have any kind of issue. Let me clear all the data. Let me clear the message as well, and come back to that particular screen. I'm going to reload the application. If now we try to create the dev 1, so we have the dev 1, we have hi, so it's updating over here. We have okay, so the time we close, okay, we will check on the crash later. So we have the hey and we have the hi. Yeah, we don't have that issue anymore. Sometimes we add two things that are very important. It's my bad luck. I'm so sorry for that. Okay, so just we need to add the ID over at this section when you're trying to create the chat list. Okay, regarding the chat list you're trying to create, so as you can see over here, in the last message is showing over here. If we now go to the dev 3 again, if you click on the dev 1, it's going to be updated, because every time you click on the chat list create section, you are updating the last message to an empty string. So there are a couple of things you can do. You can check for the chat list is already created or not, and based on that you can create a chat list or simply navigate to that particular screen. And what I gonna do for a quick solution, I'm going to remove the chat last message section. so there will be no last message section, and each time we are going to do a chat, so there will be no okay, yeah, so yeah, okay, so we need to put the condition over here, the chat list is created or not, because each time you are updating the chat list, if you are doing this like this way, so the room ID is also getting changed, so the existing room ID was replaced with a new one, so not able to find the previous chat as well. So the time you are trying to create the chat list, we are going to also check the if the chat list is already exists or not. If it's already exists, we are going to just simply navigate to a particular screen, or we are going to just simply create the chat list. So first we are going to check if the chat list is already exist or not. So if you click on this particular thing, we are going to just normally do one time read like this one. So we're going to call this thing and check. So how we are going to check that? So we're going to check that by using this particular thing. So we're going to check if the chat list is created. I'm going to check based on our user data if it's already exist or not. Okay, so if it's already exist, you're going to return a value, or otherwise it will return null. So if we check now, if we click on dev3, we are getting user data, and there is a data, so the data is already exists, so we don't need to create a chat list, otherwise we need to. So we're going to put everything inside that particular function, and we're going to put a condition. If this thing is null, this thing not equals to null, then we are going to do this, otherwise we are going to simply navigate to that particular screen, and we are getting that object, so I'm gonna simply pass that snapshot.val. So if we check now, so the time we are trying to, okay, so if we click on this section now and try to chat, so everything seems to work. And if we navigate to from this particular screen, okay, it was dev3 or something else. Yeah, it was dev3. Okay, so it's not able to fetch the existing chat like it's fetching here. And why it's not able to fetch the existing chat, let me check. Okay, so we need to pass this thing, and I guess we are passing this thing. Okay, so we are passing this thing, but it's not able to fetch. Okay, if it's null, so it's going to create a chat list. If it's not null, it's going to it's going to fetch the existing chat list data. So first we're going to check we are receiving the data properly or not. So if we click on save and come back to this screen and try to navigate to the existing one, so we are getting receiver data, we are getting room ID. So what is wrong happening right now? Let me clear the data because we are doing editing, deleting everything. So let me clear that all from the beginning and start from the beginning, and let me reload this thing. Okay, so first we are going to create a chat list. We created a chat list, then we are going to send a message. Yeah, we are getting the message, and if we are trying to chat over here, we are also can chat, and we are still getting the message. The chat list data is updating. Okay, so the problem is if we trying to click on this thing, so it will fetch the existing data we have. Yeah, it's still fetching the existing data we have, and if you're trying to go to from there, it will still fetch the existing data we have. And if you go to this thing, it will fetch the data we have, and if we go from here, it will fetch the existing data we have. Yeah, it's working. So the previous time maybe there was some old data or maybe cache issue, so I'm going to reload the application and check one more time. Yeah, it's fetching the data. Yeah, it's fetching the old data. Yeah, it's working. Okay, so it's working now. So we did modify the chat list a bit, not a bit, a lot. So yeah, so for the right reason, let me explain that. Okay, so each time you are trying to create a chat list, that means you are updating the data of the chat list, that means you are updating the name, image and stuff and everything. So each time you are doing that, so if you are not checking that existing data is exist or not, so if you are trying to do that, the room ID is getting generated with a new one. So if you are checking that the data is exist or not, so if it exists, then it already have a room ID and an object inside that particular chat list table. So we are checking that if data is null, so then only that time we are going to create the chat list, and if data is exist, we are not going to create a chat list. We are going to simply navigate to the single chat screen with the data we are getting from the Firebase database. I hope it makes sense. Okay, so now we are having some cache issue at the beginning, and maybe of this kind of thing, the ID and the data and stuff, and so now everything seems to work the way we expected. And yeah, so it's getting updated. It's then getting updated over here, and you can show the data, the message that you received from at the top over here if you want. Yeah, so everything seems to work, and so now you can do a one-to-one chat successfully. So for this video we're going to keep in this way. It's already getting too long, and in the next video we are trying to do like the notification section, and we also need to add the image sending, and also someone requested we need to send the audio as well. So we're going to look into that matter in future videos. For this video it will a simple one-to-one chat, and also did modify the chat list and stuff. And if you want to like render the chat list based on the time that because you want, I mean that the last message we received that going to be at the top like WhatsApp and Facebook. So you can do a simple thing based on in the chat list section. So we are getting all the data at a time snapshot. So just need to use the short function based on the time, based on the send time we have in the chat list. We are showing the send time. Let me show you chat list we have at the send time. So based on the send time short, you can simply show the last message at the top. Okay, so thank you for watching this video. For this video, we're going to keep that as it is, and we're going to focus regarding the next topic in the future videos. So if you like my videos, please make sure to like and put your thoughts in the comment section. It's really helped the YouTube algorithm. And do share the video with your friends and let me know how you like the video in the comment section. So thanks for watching. Bye bye.